So I'm going to talk very quickly about JavaScript in the enterprise and what doing JavaScript professionally means in 2018. It means modularity with easy discovery. It means frictionless workflows. It means strong access control and compliance. But first, why should you care? So 8 billion downloads every 7 days. 10 million developers are using NPM. The NPM registry has grown 19,500% since NPM became a company, which is obviously just a ridiculous number. Who even cares about that kind of growth when it gets that big? But in context, it's even more amazing. We went and manually checked the websites of the top 50 of the Fortune 500, and all 50 of the Fortune 50 are using NPM in production. The hardest one was Berkshire Hathaway, who have a website that was written in HTML2 and looks like it hasn't changed since 1995. It's all font tags. But luckily, one of their subsidiaries uses NPM, so we got through that way. All 50 of the 50 biggest financial firms use NPM. All 50 of the 50 biggest tech firms use NPM. We are ubiquitous. And JavaScript is also enormously popular. JavaScript is the most popular language on GitHub. Stack Overflow's survey of developers also says that it is the most popular language there. Third-party surveys like SlashData's survey of developers say that we are the most popular language in the world. And NPM is the biggest library of open source software of any kind by any measure by a gigantic margin. So if you put all of those numbers together, it is possible that something like 60% of all programmers of any kind are using NPM every day. So here's another fun fact. In GitHub's 2018 State of the Octoverse, JavaScript was the #1 language and also the #7 language because the #7 language is TypeScript, which is also just JavaScript with a transpiler. A couple of people have mentioned TypeScript tonight. It is exploding in popularity now, as that graph shows. We surveyed 16,000 NPM developers and discovered that 46% of them are using TypeScript for things, which is very, very surprising to 54% of us. So if you're not already using it, 46% adoption is the time where you should start going, OK, this is probably not just something that Microsoft likes. This is probably something we should try. The next thing to know is where JavaScript is being used, and the answer is everywhere. People are building lots of websites in JavaScript, obviously. People are also writing server-side applications in Node, which was NPM's history. But lots of people are writing mobile apps in JavaScript using frameworks like React Native. Lots of people are writing desktop apps in JavaScript using, obviously, OpenFin and things like Electron. And all of these people are using NPM packages to do it. NPM has become the package manager for all of JavaScript. But in particular, NPM has become indispensable for the field of rich web applications, which these days is nearly every web app. 97% of the code in a modern web application is downloaded from NPM. All of those people that you employ, all of the code that they write, is the last 3% of the application. It is the interesting and unique part of the application. It is the thing that makes your application different and useful to you. But 97% of the code is coming from NPM. So I could go on, but what it boils down to is that JavaScript has become, for better or worse, the most important programming language in the world. And that is a strange and obviously self-serving thing to say, but it's also a weird thing to say because this was not the plan. When we were putting together form validation in 1996, this was not where we intended this to go. There was not a master plan of taking over the universe. And probably this isn't the programming language we would have picked. If we'd sort of sat down and said, what do we want to be the lingua franca of all programming, we probably wouldn't have picked JavaScript. But here we are now, and this is the reality we're in. So it's time that we face the music. But I still haven't fully answered my original question, which is why should you care about this stuff? Because 5 or 10 years ago, JavaScript didn't really matter. You had 5 devs using jQuery, and it wasn't relevant. Now you have hundreds of devs writing rich web applications, so you are spending an enormous amount of money on JavaScript and generating a lot of valuable IP in JavaScript. How much money is a ton of money exactly? So at big financial institutions, it's not uncommon now for there to be several hundred developers who are writing JavaScript full-time who work exclusively or mostly in JavaScript, and developers are expensive. So it's not at all uncommon for a large financial institution to be spending $100 million a year on JavaScript developers, just to the developers, and less than 1% of that on tooling to make those developers effective, which is a very strange ratio. Because believe it or not, this is just the beginning. JavaScript is just getting rolling. The move towards design systems using reusable components is very fashionable in design circles right now. And the way that those happen is they create reusable design components that are written in React nearly all of the time. So people that you don't even think of as developers, people in the design department, are now also using NPM to get their jobs done because those components are distributed as NPM packages. The design department at Facebook in particular has pioneered the practice of having designers work with visual tools on actual working code that can then get sent back to the developers without having to be recoded, which is fascinating. And as Neil mentioned earlier, the advent of WebAssembly, aka WASM, further broadens the scope of this revolution. WebAssembly allows any compiled language to be transpiled into JavaScript bytecode, which can then execute in a browser at the speed of native code. And WASM modules can already be published as normal NPM packages to the NPM registry and interact with other JavaScript code as if it wasn't there. And in fact, that's already happened. And in fact, some people are already using WASM in production in their production stacks without even knowing it was there, because it just works in most browsers. And this opens the door to a potential future in which any useful library from any other language can be transpiled into JavaScript, put into the NPM registry, and contribute to the already very, very large pile of libraries that exist on NPM. Mark Andreessen famously said that software is eating the world, and now it appears that JavaScript is eating software. Again, this is not a future that anyone would have predicted, but it is a reality that we have to address. And it is a reality that is not being fully addressed right now. In other languages used in the enterprise like Java and C++, there is a ton of tooling around this stuff. There is a ton of process around this stuff. There's a lot of people making sure that they are getting ROI for all these people that they employ to write JavaScript. They're checking the quality, they're checking the security, they're checking whether or not it is being done well. But in JavaScript, it is still very much the Wild West. Big companies are only just realizing that they need to take JavaScript seriously as an enterprise language like the other languages in their stack. And the reason that this hasn't happened yet is because it happened so fast. Like I showed you in that graph, nearly all of this growth has happened in 5 years, and large enterprises, particularly in the financial world, are not used to reacting to gigantic sea changes that happen in 5 years. JavaScript went in 5 years from being an afterthought to being the most important language in your stack. So it's well past time to professionalize JavaScript. But what do I mean when I say that we should professionalize JavaScript? It means getting systematic about it. It means putting process around it. And the goals of those processes and that system is to achieve two things. First, you want to ship quickly. To do that, you need to use modular JavaScript effectively by making it easy to discover without disrupting your existing workflows. And second, you want to ship it safely by controlling access to your code and by detecting vulnerabilities in your code. But let's dig a little bit deeper into both of those things. What do I mean by using modular JavaScript effectively? Modular JavaScript is key to shipping quickly, and if you need a demonstration of that, the gigantic popularity of the NPM registry is that proof. Everyone is doing it because it helps us get stuff done faster. But there's a really relevant study here, if me just saying it is not enough for you, by a guy called Leo Meyerowitz at UC Berkeley, who did a whole PhD about why do people pick a programming language. He studied all of the factors that go into picking a programming language. Is it, I knew this language already, other people in my company use it, I like the features of this language, I like the performance of this language. What is it that's the primary reason? And the primary reason was the availability of open source libraries to help me get that job done. Over and above any other factor, the people pick the language where the work is already almost complete, which is pretty intuitively easy to find. So the libraries are driving JavaScript adoption. So one conclusion you can draw from that is that not only is JavaScript's popularity fueling the growth of NPM, but that's a two-way street. The gigantic pile of libraries on NPM, the 835,000 libraries on NPM, are fueling the growth of JavaScript itself. This is a cycle that's pushing both of them to the moon. And that is important for your company, because the explosion of popularity of NPM is the result of making code that is easy to reuse. So these NPM packages, they have simple contracts that don't require a ton of meetings, right? You don't have to call up the developer of Express and ask him if it's okay that you can use Express. You just install the damn thing and it works. And if they push a breaking change, it doesn't break you because that is how NPM was designed to function. You can produce that same frictionless workflow inside your company and create the same kind of exponential growth in productivity that is happening in the wider JavaScript world within your smaller community inside of your company. Because reusing code is fantastic, obviously. If 97% of your code comes from NPM, then that means you did way less work than you would otherwise have done. It means that you got much higher quality code than you would have otherwise got because other people have found the bugs. Other people have been hammering at this for a while. It also means that you can hire people who already know how to work on your stack. If 97% of your code is open source code that other people have already run into, then you're only going to have to be teaching them about the special snowflake that is your last 3% of your code, and that is a much easier job. But that stuff does not come without downsides. You are employing all of these people, you are training them in quality, you are training them in process, you are training them in how to write secure code, but the other 97% of the code is not subject to your internal processes. You can't tell the developers of your 97% of your application how to write your application better. So malicious code on NPM is actually surprisingly rare. The social mechanisms that keep NPM popular also tend to keep bad actors out of NPM. What is extremely common on NPM is accidentally vulnerable code and people not keeping up with updates when that happens. So earlier this year, NPM started automatically auditing all NPM installs for known security vulnerabilities. We now do more than 4 million of those scans every week, and the results are not good. 51% of the installs that we see have some kind of vulnerability in them, and 11% of the installs that we see have a critical vulnerability in them. A critical vulnerability should be a smash the glass, hit the big red button, do not ship to production problem, and 11% of our installs have those vulnerabilities in them, and we can look at our server logs and we can see a lot of financial institutions who should know better pushing these things into production. So, the good news is that NPM's audit functionality will not just tell you that you're installing vulnerable packages and sort of give you an amorphous sense of dread. We will also help you fix them by automatically upgrading your packages to the secure versions. This is a real leap forward in JavaScript security. We're not just the piece of software that puts packages on your disk for you. We are now a piece of software that can improve the security of your software just by giving you signals every day and helping you upgrade. External security through NPM audits is great, but you also need internal controls about who has access to your software. Your security has to be airtight, but it has to not present a barrier to workflows. If your security becomes a barrier to your developers are very clever and extremely impatient, and they will work around your security, and that is worse than no security, because then you think you have security, but actually, they're going to their home Wi-Fi network and installing a bunch of JavaScript packages without telling you. And finally, there's compliance, which is a huge concern for major financial institutions. Compliance was easy when the only JavaScript that we were using was jQuery. You just said we use jQuery, and everyone was like, OK, well, everybody else is using jQuery, so we're probably compliant. But now, the average web app has over 1,000 modules in it. There's no human way for you to inspect 1,000 modules and be absolutely sure that you don't have any compliance problems in that stack. You need tools to help you do it. And the good news is that we can help you with that as well. I mentioned just now that security that devs work around is worse than no security, and this can also happen with compliance. At more than one major financial institution that we have spoken to, we have seen compliance policies in place that are frankly clown shoes. They are, we banned open source JavaScript, and I'm like, well, no, you didn't. Here are the server logs. Or They have an official process that involves, like filling in a form and waiting a month while somebody in the IT department, manually inspects whether or not this package is okay. And I'm like, okay, but you shipped 3,000 packages to production last week. So you can't possibly have really inspected them, so you must be ignoring the form, right? You can't actually be doing that. So putting heavyweight processes based on old languages into production with JavaScript is just not going to work for you. So your approach to using NPM can't be using thousands and thousands of JavaScript packages and just hoping that nobody notices, right? There has to be a new way of doing this that actually works for this new reality of thousands of modules and 97% of your code coming from outside the building. So there are real risks here, and these risks can be managed, but you can't do it just by ignoring them. And this is what it comes down to. You have to professionalize the use of your JavaScript. So what is stopping people doing that? Obviously, everybody in the room is going to be like, OK, well, we knew we should do that. What's stopping people usually is fear, especially in finance, fear of exposure, fear of risk. But even in the sort of most well-meaning of development departments, what slows people down about doing things securely is fear of being slowed down. Nobody wants to go slow. Everybody has deadlines. The fear, even at quite small companies, the fear that a compliance process and a security process is going to mean that you ship late means that people get away with things that they know they shouldn't be doing. So our solution to how to professionalize JavaScript is called NPM Enterprise. We're the world's experts in shipping JavaScript quickly and safely. And we built the best tool available to help you do that. We listened very, very carefully to the needs of enterprise consumers about what it was they needed to be able to ship JavaScript. And we have built a tool that will genuinely help you ship faster, and it will foster collaboration within your company, and it will keep your JavaScript more secure than any other tool that exists. At the same time, we designed it with enterprise IT departments in mind, so it ticks every checkbox and is compliant with the kind of requirements that enterprise IT has. So it feels just like NPM, the same NPM that your developers are already using, whether or not they're telling you that they're using it, but your IT department can get behind it. So NPM Enterprise gives you your own private registry on your own private domain that you can lock down to your network. So you get your own NPM website with full search of public packages, as well as search of your own company's packages. Not just package names. You get the full readmes. You get full search. It's just like npmjs.com. And NPM Enterprise also ships with support for NPM Audit and NPM Audit Fix. So you get the same kind of instant updates and upgrades that using NPM properly will give you. In addition to public vulnerabilities that users of the public registry get, enterprise customers will also get embargoed vulnerabilities that our security team has found but not yet publicly disclosed. So everyone is familiar with the 0-day vulnerability. These are the minus 30-day vulnerabilities. So you can fix things at leisure before they are publicly disclosed and not have a fire drill about it. And finally, NPM Enterprise has fine-grained access control, so you can create scopes and organizations for individual units in your businesses so they don't fight with each other over what things get named. And you can use your existing single sign-on solution, so you don't have to constantly add and remove users. Just anybody who's in your company has the access. This is something that you can use your single sign-on to sign on from the command line, which is something that no other tool supports. Speaking of solutions, something we sometimes hear is that we already have a thing that does this, and I'm here to tell you that unless you have bought our thing, you do not have a thing that does this, because we just finished inventing it. I know that Java and JavaScript have similar names, but that does not mean that you can use a Java tool to manage JavaScript. Just because screws and nails are both pointy does not mean that if you try hammering a screw into the wall, it will work. NPM Enterprise has a long list of features, and I'm not going to go into all of them, but the important thing is it satisfies the goals that I laid out. It helps you ship faster, and it helps you ship more safely, and it helps you actually achieve compliance and not just pretend that you have. Obviously, it's a huge shocker that a company called NPM recommends a product called NPM, but there is a reason that it is good, and the reason that it is good is because we picked one language and doubled down on it. We picked the most important language in your stack, the one that we're really, really good at, and we made the best tool that we could possibly make. Because it really is a surprise that JavaScript became the most important programming language in the world, so you need to focus on it too. So If you think that we can help you out, we are in the bar next door, in the room at the back with our own screen and a bar that not as many people are using. You can find us there, or you can reach us at these contact details. And I will cease holding you back from the free drinks, and thank you very much for your attention.